Again, I got to tell you, these shorter episodes, they're great. But on the other hand, I find myself coming to them now going, oh, there's a lot of shit to talk about. Like a lot of shit to talk about. I don't think we're going to get it all covered today. And then I'm thinking, well, that's okay because we can cover it in episode 2 of season 5. And then I thought to myself, no, because we have a kick-ass guest coming on for episode 2 of season 5. I'm like, episode 3? Oh, no, we have another kick-ass guest from the community coming on in episode 3. And wow, there's just so many things that are happening. It's exciting. So we got to fit in all these insights somewhere.
I know, right? It's kind of like there's a sense of urgency. You can feel it on Patreon calls as well. It's just like, all right, we gotta get into this. No warming up. It's just diving in. But it's been kind of fun, that shift, because we for a while there we're doing the 2-hour streams, and those are a lot of fun, but it's just different. That's all. So yeah, these are great, but I can dive right into something if that's what we're thinking. I know we were just chatting about, unless you got some announcements or something.
I do actually. I do want to say this. Tier 1 of Patreon was supposed to get early access to our Vermont tickets this week. They did not, and that is my fault because, frankly, I've been just swamped with season 5 stuff. But early access for Tier 1 Vermont tickets will be made available later today. I do appreciate everybody's patience. There are a few tickets left. I do hope to see you at the Vermont retreat. It's a mini retreat. It goes from the 24th to the 28th. So that's a Thursday night to a Monday morning. Not very hard to schedule. Hopefully you're somewhere in the area. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a cabin, a very woodsy cabin. Frankly, it's epic. It's got a pool table. I'm pretty sure there's a pinball machine. There's 3 different levels. There's a lot of place to chill, giant yard. There's a pond with a fountain, some benches that we can all just hang out in. I'll be smoking weed, so that means more than likely you'll be smoking weed, or at least there will be weed available. It's going to be a fun event. 21 years and over. Obviously, you've got to be an adult. Yeah, no, I'm pretty stoked. I do want to say something quickly before I pass it to Andrew, because I know we're just going to tear right into it. I've been talking to quite a few members of the community lately who, through all the work that they've done in their own lives, and again, they get all the credit for this, because I could talk till I'm blue in the face, and so could Andrew, and it wouldn't make a damn difference at all if it wasn't for the fact that you're doing something with it. But day by day, week by week, month by month, these people have been just accepting that maybe what they think about themselves isn't the truth. And they're finding more and more moments of relaxation. They're finding more and more moments of uncertainty, but not panic in that uncertainty. And life starts to take on this feeling kind of like you are just floating along with it. It doesn't feel quite so arduous, but in that there is almost this urge to panic. Like, is it supposed to feel like this? Am I not supposed to be worried? Am I not supposed to be more concerned than I am right now? And so you start to become concerned about your lack of concern. And quite a few people have expressed this to me lately. And I just wanted to give everybody a shout out, because it's really the result of all the work you're doing. Don't panic. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get used to. But yeah, life really isn't the arduous journey that we tend to perceive it as. It's just that we get so caught up in trying to protect ourselves. We get so caught up in trying to be something that we create conflict. And we do that for so long, we don't recognize that we're doing it. So I just wanted to say, you're doing great. I'm so happy. And it's great to hear all of these success stories, because that's what changes everything. Your successes, how well you can live your life. That said, a brief shout out to cannabis. A lot of people have been expressing that they've been enjoying cannabis lately as a result of their newfound relaxation. It's not just you, Andrew. And it's largely because you're not using it as an escape, which means that you're not being used by it. It's still you in a different conscious environment, which gives you entirely different things that you can work on in different ways. And so I appreciate that everybody has been appreciating cannabis. Brief shout out to cannabis. Last shout out, it's Mother's Day. If you're a mother, happy Mother's Day, because it's fucking hard. It is definitely not an easy job, but if it wasn't for the job itself, it wasn't for the work that mothers do, honestly, we'd all be fucked. Whether you're doing a good job or you don't feel like you're doing a good job, you're doing the job. You're taking responsibility. You're putting the time in. You're putting yourself second to some other being. that may not be easy, but it really is important. And so a brief shout out to mothers, though we should be doing that all the time in our own ways. You don't have to deliberately go out there and go, mothers are awesome, but you can at least, think about the fact that someone helped you come into the world. Like, I'm the first one to say I have no relationship with my own, but it's not that I don't appreciate having one, because it got me here. And regardless of what my life might have been after the fact, I've made a lot of it. So I'm still appreciative for being here, regardless of the relationship or non-relationship I have with the person who brought me here. I can at least appreciate the role that they play. So try to do that today.
And at the very least, the lessons you've learned. But yeah, shout out mothers. Happy Mother's Day. It's quite the duty, and not one that is any, like, one of the toughest things I think you can do is fully, I don't know, give yourself and your attention and all of that to raising another human being. It's a massive responsibility, and yeah, is pretty incredible job that's done just on such a consistent basis by so many people in the world. So yeah, happy Mother's Day. And Mom, if you're out there watching, which I don't think you probably, if you've checked out any episodes, I don't know if you've checked out any raw episodes, but I love you very much. Appreciate everything you've helped me with throughout my life. So
yes, you're awesome, Andrew's mom. I really do have to say that. He's an awesome person. Everybody in the community appreciates him. And although that is not entirely your responsibility, you certainly played a huge role in it. So thank you, Andrew's mom.
Certainly did. Yeah. And regarding everything else you were talking about with people in the community recognizing a shift in perspective, I've certainly been feeling that as well. I think cannabis has been a fun tool to utilize in those. I don't know. It's interesting. Ray and I were talking before we hopped on here just about the lack of concern. And you said it pretty well, like the concern about the lack of concern can come up sometimes. And I think I want to reiterate, because it's just kind of hitting me, that's part of the process. Like, you're still making progress when even just recognizing the lack of concern that you have, and that shift, despite whatever you have going on surrounding your lack of concern. If you have some concern about that lack of concern, there's still things unfolding, and you don't necessarily have to get in there and be like, I should be, I should be more concerned, or I should be less concerned about my lack of concern or whatever. You don't have to judge yourself, is what I'm trying to say. And because there is a getting used to, it's almost like, you make a jump in insight, or you start seeing things differently, or you start recognizing that this isn't, this is starting to feel more dreamlike. And again, that's just a description, but that's how it's been feeling for me, especially when I smoke. But there's almost like a at least for me, like a catching up period almost, where it's like, yeah, you have some deeper fucking insights and bigger fucking insights, however you want to describe them. And it's like the way you function in the world is kind of like catching up to the insight almost, because it takes each and every insight takes time and attention and practice to kind of embody it. I mean, yes and no. It doesn't necessarily have to take an extended period of time to begin embodying it. It's really just like your willingness to let go of the concern, and each and every time how long that takes you to do so, which is, again, that one step process. But the reality of how it plays out is through experience and going through different things and just being willing to step into different things. And I know for myself, like I've always kind of been self-critical. So even if, I make a jump, I do something that's out of my comfort zone. It's like, I'll do something that's outside of my comfort zone, and then I'll recognize something else that's like more outside my comfort zone. Like, I won't do that. And then I'll be like, I'll forget about the thing that I did that was already outside of my comfort zone and just focus on the thing. I was like, yeah, but you little bitch, you didn't do that one. Like, you didn't really go that far. You could have done that. Like, what's holding you back from that? What are you afraid of? This is, why are you so concerned about that outcome? And so we can get a little bit ahead of ourselves with that. And so I think it's important that letting go of that additional judgment, it's whenever you can drop it is what it comes down to, like whenever you can arrive. But yeah, so that's kind of my initial lead. And I have some deeper stuff regarding like attachment to people, attachment to the dream. Like, if you can actually love someone from a egotistical perspective, or can you only ever love an idea? Like, when you're attached to someone, I texted Ray the other night, like, it kind of hit me because I was with my friends and I was kind of like, we were pretty high, and I was kind of toying back and forth with like them, their name, the story I have of them, and like dropping that and just sitting in that, because I was recognizing like what's convincing me this isn't real. And then I was talking with them, hanging with them, and I was realizing how much of a story and an attachment to their identity was reinforcing my own. So it was like that thin veil going back and forth. And it hit me like, oh, my attachment to them, their story, my idea of them is like my attachment to, I said, to the dream, like to this being real or not a dream. And Ray texted back something like, or at least how we perceive it shifts. But it really is that attachment to concepts and ideas. So then it hit me even just this morning, like, can you love someone truly from an egotistical identified perspective? Because they're not the idea you have of them. And if you're loving an idea, you can only ever love that idea until you recognize them for what they are. And so just going through all that shit, that was kind of a lot, but I'll pass back to Ray.
That's a damn good question. It always comes down to what we mean by love, right? Like, typically when people think about love, they think about like an action, so like, I love this person in a romantic way, or in a way where, there's a reciprocity there. Whereas, as we've discussed before, love is more like service, right? It's really not about attachment. Love is not attachment. Like, if love is not like, I love this person until they hurt me and they leave me. It's like, that's not love. That's still self-serving. That's all egotism, in which case that's not love, right? It's conditional. It has to be conditional because it's afraid. So all egotistical love is afraid. And that love is in response to the fear of being alone. And so it's not really love, right? Whereas true love is love, period. Not for someone, but period. It's a state of acceptance, of being, of service. Again, of not having any need. It's basically loving yourself, but not loving yourself, the idea. Again, it's not an action. It's a cessation of action. It's no longer needing to run towards or away from any idea that you're not lovable. You just are what you are, which is the definition of self-love. And in that state, there is no need, and thus there is nothing that needs to be validated. So you don't look at anybody else as a means to an end. And that in itself is love, because that's acceptance without condition, right? And so, yeah, I think that it's a good question, because if love is the result of need, or love is the result of a perception of another, right, then it is immediately distorted, because why are you perceiving the other outside of fear, right? Outside of some idea of yourself that you're holding on to for control, or to bank on getting that thing in the end result, because that's a big part of it. Like, we have things that we hope for, we have things that we want. And of course, there's a person there that must achieve those things. And as long as there's a person there that must achieve those things, there's a separation between me and everybody else, which is why the classic story of people getting over involved with their work and forgetting their relationships is so common. Right? It's because I'm going to be more there, and all of a sudden my marriage is falling apart. It's like, well, what was your priority? Exactly. And they'd say, well, I'm just trying to provide. It's like, yeah, provide, but you're also trying to reinforce yourself. You're also trying to focus on your idea of who you are and what a success is and where you have control and all that other fun stuff. and your marriage suffers because your priority isn't connection with yourself. Because when you're connected to yourself and your spouse comes up to you and they say, like, I feel like we're not talking, you listen, right? Whereas if you're focused on some shiny carrot and some invisible stick, you can't listen. You got shit to do.
So when, in that example, when someone's striving to become more at work, like my perspective on this is shifting so much, like the drive to become something, or at least I'm recognizing it more in people, how attached to themselves they are. And just like, I think I texted you this the other day too, when just realizing how attached and how the expression of the way people do things and express things, like how much it's involved in themselves. And I don't mean to say it from like the selfish sort of egotistical, like so involved in myself type thing, but it's very, very involved in themselves from the recognition that they're not what they think. Like they are just reality. They're not the idea. They're not the story. How many things people do reinforcing the story to reinforce the story. And it's all like all the narratives they hold on to about other people and someone they're looking up to, or like anything, like almost all of what we do. And I don't know why it's like right now it's hitting me in a different way. Like the last few days, I've been noticing it with everything, like seeing things as like there's been like a layer stripped off, and I'm seeing like the next thing, like why people are doing certain things, and really sensitive to those recognitions. And so it's like, and I know it's just because I'm paying attention, like I'm just paying attention to where I'm at. And that's been the interesting part with the, feeling like this is more of a dream. Like yesterday I was with a good amount of people hanging out, and I had smoked a little and was just kind of going back and forth in like during conversations of like feeling like it's a dream and then feeling like it's not, and then not thinking about what it feels like and just being in it, because that's what it really is. And then like coming out, and it was interesting just because there's not so much past and future being involved in your interactions at all, because there's nothing like that really is based around our perception of ourselves, is the past and the future, and the concern or the need to think about it. Without that concern so much, there isn't any need to think about it, because that's not what is. And you're just paying attention to where you're at, enjoying the fullness, appreciating the fullness of the experience and the intricacies of the dream, like looking at things being like, holy shit, that's like, it is beautiful. It is incredibly, incredibly beautiful. And like so intricate and detailed. And it hit me over and over, like, this is exactly and again, not from a control perspective, but just like, this is exactly how I would want it to be, like the balance of just the uncertainty of everything, like looking at someone and interacting with someone and not knowing how they're going to respond or react. Like that's incredible. But it's always two sides. You never know how it's going to be. But again, like we were talking about last week, it's still their response is going to be a projection. How you take their response is going to be a projection of your mind, and you can never know what they're actually doing. So, man, yeah, it's been, I don't know. I keep saying like things, it's been interesting, but it's just been interesting going like in and out of that sort of recognition, and just kind of, I don't know, having more fun with it, I guess.
Absolutely. Again, my favorite word, interesting, worthy of interest, because it is absolutely, but it's such a different way of living. It's instead of trying to grasp for some idea of what's happening all the time, you start to recognize that the ideas are actually tripping you up. And so you start to let go, and life takes on a different tone. And because life takes on a different tone, because what I mean by letting go is that you're just embracing where you are. Because at the end of the day, and I've said this before, this is where things are happening. I always find it funny how much we'll look towards the future trying to change our path when we're on it. This is where the path changes, right? But we spend so much time looking at some fictitious future, thinking that's going to help us change the path, but it's actually the quality of the step that we're taking. And that quality is based on how present we are. And that's what brings us closer to the potential. That's what brings us closer to a moment where somebody could come up to us and say something that we've never heard, and we can respond in a way that we've never responded, and take a path that we've never seen, simply because we've stepped out of the habit that would have caused us to have the previous responses that we've used before, and thus only access the doors that we've accessed before. And so it's always about changing yourself. It's always about questioning your idea of yourself until you yourself become more potential. It's not become more potential, but reveal how much potential is there. We're just always closing that potential. That's all we're ever doing. I was talking to Amanda, who of course everybody knows here. And Amanda is, to say that Amanda is efficient would be an understatement. Andrew and I have both said things to Amanda like, hey, it'd be really cool if we did this, or we reached out to this person. And all of a sudden, within 5 or 10 minutes, we'll get an email from Amanda going, here you go. Here's all the information you were looking for and more. And so everybody knows that Amanda is helpful to the community and she's always out there. But in her own journey, she was expressing that she's starting to slow down. She's starting to come more to the moment, to relax a little bit more. And what she's found is that rather than there being less energy, less momentum, which is what you would assume, because we think driving towards being the doer, driving towards the future is what's giving us our momentum. In fact, there's more momentum, there's more potential in slowing down, because now all of a sudden, any direction you take has all of you in it, as opposed to you just reacting in a knee-jerk kind of fashion. Got to go that way. And half of your heart is in it because you're not actually sure that's the direction you want to go. It's partially based on fear. You're weighing your pros and your cons. You're like, oh, 60% this way. Okay. But you're still indecisive, wondering if you should have taken the other path the entire time that you're on this one. Right. Whereas when you let all that go, then any direction you choose, you're giving it your full attention, which means you're giving it your full potential.
And it's like that with any decision you make, and any person you interact with too, like having that full attention. It's like, you actually want to make shifts or connect with people. Like even from that, just to run with this example, like wanting to connect with people and wanting, people to like you, and you go into a situation and like, you're not fully attentive because you want them to like you. You have this ulterior motive of you. And like, where is that coming from? Why do you want them to like you? Because you have this perception of yourself that isn't enough. And you have all of this narrative coming into the situation. And so that's like, you're coming in it with 50% attention max. That's probably an overstatement. It's probably like 5% attention. And yet you want people to perceive you in a certain way. It's like, what are you willing to do? Like, you're not even willing to give all of your attention to the situation. And yet this is what you really want. Like, come on now. So you have to be willing to let go of the concern for how they act, to actually, like, you have to be willing to drop that weight to give the attention that is not, and again, it's not deserved or not required by any means, but you might as well, right? You might as well. But if you're so overly concerned with how you're being perceived and what people are going to think, like, it's impossible to give the full attention. But the more fullness of attention you give, the more you're going to recognize yourself and anyone that you interact with. Because we build these narratives and stories about ourselves and like, oh, I can connect with this person. I can't connect with this person because, like, we don't have as much in common. It's like, you're the same thing. At the end of the day, you're the same thing. So yeah, sure, there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of ideas that are layered on top between you and them, and on top of you and on top of them, and all that shit. But without all of that, you're the same thing. So there is the potential to connect with anyone. It's just, we tell ourselves a story. We have an idea of them. We have all of these ideas of what we need, what we want, what they're thinking. And it's all just getting in the way of actually giving that attention to another iteration of yourself. It's not even giving your attention to a person. It's giving your attention to the fullness of the experience, which just so happens to involve a person as well and involve yourself, but it's giving the attention to the fullness of what you are. Like, because what you are is the experience. So giving attention to yourself is giving attention to where you're at here and now. And so, of course, you're going to have more energy, whether it's a task or things you're trying to get done throughout the day or being involved in other people. Like, you're just giving attention to yourself. So, of course, there's going to be, and there's going to be shifts and there's going to be deeper ripples the more attentive you are to yourself, which, you know, without the narrative of yourself, without the idea of yourself, what's left is what is here and now, is the experience that you're having. And so giving that attention is just giving your attention to the experience. And that's where the connection is found. And sure, the person you're interacting with, they may have a lot of layers too, but it's like, you know, if each of you have 50 layers, there's 100 layers in the way. Maybe it's easier to connect with someone where, you know, they have 25 layers and you have 25 layers. But if you go into it and the other person has 50 layers and you have 10, that's still only 60 layers in the way. So like there is a responsibility of both parties, but there's the ability to have less layers in between the less you bring into it. And that's going to allow for the connection, you know, that's going to be allow for the equivalent of a connection with, you know, two people with 30 layers. That's still 60 layers in between. And I'm just, you know, throwing numbers out there. I think you're following with the example I'm giving, but it's so there is an ability to not guarantee a depth of connection, but at least if you go into it without so many thoughts, concerns, ideas of where it should go, thoughts about the other person, thoughts about yourself, you're giving a higher likelihood of having that connection and being able to, you know, put as much energy and make it the biggest ripples that you can in each and every moment, the less narrative you go into things with.
Assuming, of course, that the other person you're talking to is trying to go into that direction, which most people are. Admittedly, most people are drawn to others who are willing to connect, who are willing to be a bit more vulnerable, who are easy to talk to. But that's not always the case. There have been plenty of people and plenty of times in my life where somebody who was open actually made me pull away because I wasn't at the time. I wasn't prepared to be more open with myself. I wasn't prepared to be more vulnerable myself. And so the offer itself was kind of a threat in that state of mind. So it does help to recognize that sometimes the path you're on, people aren't always going to align with, and that's okay. The question is it important to you? Is it important to you? You know, is the experience that you're having important to you? And if so, then it's really not about other people. And that goes back to your question about love. Loving someone means accepting that maybe their life should go on without you. Sometimes it's the best thing for them is to continue on the path that you no longer resonate with, that you no longer fit in with, because sometimes we just don't. Sometimes we quote unquote wake up to the illusion and we're surrounded by people who are heavily invested in that illusion. And so just waking up in itself starts to dissolve those relationships because they were never really based on anything. Right. So that is a process that's important to keep in mind, that it may suck while you're going through it, but only because of the contrast. It's only because you were so heavily invested in that world that it sucks to crawl out of it. Continue to crawl out of it, and all of a sudden you come up to the air and the sunlight, as it were, and you start to recognize that all of that was actually a beneficial experience, but never when you're going through it. It's always kind of shitty when you're facing the stuff that you've attached to. And that's really all it is. And just let go of your idea of yourself. There's nothing wrong with the path that you've taken up to wherever it is you are. Obviously, it got you to here, which means that you couldn't have had these recognitions without everything that you've done prior. So they're super important. Don't judge yourself for anything you've done. Just keep moving forward. Don't judge your progress. This is a live stream, so I do want to address the comment section. Say hi, everyone. We had a question early on. How do I get over a breakup? I really think that she's the one. Do I try to move on or try my best to make things work? I guess it really comes down to why do you want to hold on to this person? at the end of the day, which comes down to self-honesty. Do you want to hold on to them because they're familiar? Do you want to hold on to them because you have a lot of memories and you'd like to hold on to those memories and have more? Like, the whole thing is, are you ignoring the reason that you broke up? Are you cherry picking memories? Are you cherry picking thoughts that are positive and idealizing the relationship instead of accepting what it was? Because that's the most important part. It's to accept what the relationship really is, not what you want it to be, not what it should be, what it really is. And at that point, that's what it is. There's no answer for me to give you because everybody's situation is so very different. Sometimes a breakup is something that's short term and it's caused, by a bunch of trauma that's being acted out. Sometimes it's actually the result of the relationship itself just being toxic, not working, regardless of how nice the idea of it working might be, because that's often the case. It's like, oh, but it'd be great if this were, yeah, that's great. That's only in your head. That's not reality. The reality is the argument that you're having right now. The reality is the tension. The reality is the fact that you're like, oh, what are they thinking about me? And so that stuff, if that's in your relationship, then it's a good idea to just maybe accept the fact that that relationship itself has too much distortion, as it were. And that distortion is based probably on your own need. It's based probably on your own avoidance and the want for something comfortable and familiar and that you idealize in your head. And we all go through it. Don't judge yourself for it. That's honestly the reason relationships suck most of the time. It's the reason there's so many fucking divorces. It's because we all get into relationships for the wrong reasons. And we don't take the signs. We don't read the room because frankly, we're too invested in what we want. Right? Like when you're thinking about, do I move on or do I reach back out to this person? Are you thinking about you or them? Are you thinking about you or them? Are you making the assumption they need you? Are you making the assumption their life would be better with you? Right? And if so, why are you making that assumption? Is it because you can't imagine yourself being alone, starting over from scratch? The real question is, can you accept that the relationship may not ever happen? And if you can accept that and live your life as though that's the case, then maybe it will happen. Maybe something will happen where you have a conversation because you're not so needy and there's not so much attachment and there isn't so much back and forth. There's not so much of an ideal relationship you're trying to achieve. You're actually in the conversation. Miracles can happen. I'm not saying they can't, but they only happen here and now. And how present are you, or how much are in the future or the past are you? Because that's not where your relationship is.
Yeah. And like, are you willing, as uncomfortable as it is, as you said, like, are you willing to look at that need? Because it's coming from somewhere. Like every time we kind of have in our society created this idea of relationships being just, a part of the societal blueprint. They're just, they're a part of it. You get a job, and then after a while you meet someone, you start a family and raise a family and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But no, like that can be a byproduct of relationships with people and interactions, but it isn't this like requirement. We've almost turned it into a requirement, but no, it's coming from some need. When you go so over the top as to start saying things, people do say this, which is nuts, but like it's very common. Like, I need this person. It's like that's coming from somewhere, like a lack of recognition of what you are, or a conceptual idea of what you think you are. Like, it's coming from a story that you're telling yourself that you feel like you need this person. Like, that's not something that exists in reality here and now. That perception of the other person and needing that person, and what life would be if you got, quote unquote, got that person, which is an insane thing to say. Even like, I feel weird saying that out loud. Getting that person. It's like, yeah, okay, getting that person to like you, whatever. But it's always coming from somewhere. Like, there is a depth of need to that. And I guess people that's like uncomfortable to look at that, because there could be a lot of layers to that, where that's coming from, that need. A lot of times it comes from childhood, previous experiences and whatnot, but very few people look at it. They're able to use getting a relationship as kind of an excuse, a way to avoid it. Oh, as long as I stay in a relationship, then I'll never have to look at it, because I'll always have someone to be there for me, with me. At least I have them. At least, someone wants me. And so I'm not sitting in this pit of despair of like, does anyone want me? Because I get this person, and I just need that one person. and they like me, and then I'm good, and we just are able to, kick the can down the road for our whole life of avoiding that need and where it's coming from and why we feel like we need it, because it's still there. Like, yeah, you get in a relationship, that need is still there, and it's going to distort the relationship and make the relationship something that isn't fulfilling in itself so much anymore, because it's satisfying a need. So how could it possibly be fully fulfilling in and of itself? Because there's always the underlying concern of, this person can't leave. This person can't leave. Couldn't possibly have them leave, because what would that mean about me? Would I be enough? Would I be worthy if this person left? And with the prioritization of relationships, and we can definitely stay on this for a bit, but it's making me think of just, the fullness of the experience through the recognition of this being more dreamlike. It's like anytime you attach to a person thinking you need them for a relationship is like, it's like an attachment to the dream, in a sense. Like, that's how it's felt to me. Like, I don't know, been feeling like I've been going in and out of feeling very dreamlike. And I can see where my attachments to things pull me out, my attachments to Andrew, my thoughts about Andrew, my idea of Andrew, my idea of other people, my idea of friends, my idea of, people I like, or someone I have a crush on, or whatever. It's like all attachment to the dream as more real than it is. And again, I feel weird saying things like this. I think you know what I mean, because like, this is as real as anything. It's not like this is less real, but we just take it to a point where we have this, like, I don't know, like a depth, like a certainty to the realness, which isn't the reality of what it is. So
Yeah,
this is
the
me
need.
trailing off.
It's the
Yeah.
need, right? The need drives everything. It drives our desperation to settle. It drives why we're so desperate to look for a path. It really is. It's just that need. That's where the attachment comes from. Right. So you're addressing the need. Well, where does the need come from? Oh, maybe it's always there. Oh, maybe it's because of how I think of myself. Right. So the need, it comes from my perception of myself, which I'm also attached to. Why am I attached to my perception of myself? Because it solves that uncertainty. Well, why am I afraid of that uncertainty? Right. And it just keeps looping, right? Until finally you just shut the fuck up and you're just in the experience that you're having. And then all of a sudden you're aligned with it because you've stopped fighting it, because you've stopped doing that loop. You've just stopped chasing your tail over and over and over again. But then it's learning how to live there. It's learning how to be in that. And this is why relationships are so interesting and educational, because once you stop trying to satisfy some absurd need or sense of lack in a relationship, what you start to recognize is that there is a lesson that's happening all the time. And that lesson is very much that the more you're focused on yourself, the less you can hear your partner, the less you can hear the person you're talking to. And so in a one-on-one relationship, and this kind of addresses another question that's in the chat section, so I'm going to move my way that way. In a one-on-one relationship, it really is just about learning how to dance with that person, right? So there's an equal push and pull. There's a give and take in the relationship. Like sometimes they're going to self-validate and you're going to give them the soft landing, and then other times, you'll have the temptation to self-validate, and if you don't do it, all of a sudden the conversation changes and you get a little bit closer to that person because you're not just asking them for something about yourself. And so in a relationship, you really do start to recognize that surrender and empathy and sensitivity all kind of go hand in hand. You don't necessarily have to be the focus of attention. You don't have to be the centerpiece. You don't have to be liked. You don't have to be perceived a certain way. You don't have to have these needs fulfilled. And then bam, you're in a relationship with somebody because you're actually getting close to them. You're showing them who you really are instead of who you want to see yourself as, or have them see you as. So there's a dance that happens in that one-on-one relationship, but it's all about self-sacrifice. It's all about getting out of your own way, because otherwise, what's the relationship for other than you? And that's not a relationship. You might as well just go out and buy a robot partner right? Because at least then you can tell them exactly what you want them to do, and you don't have to consider their feelings at all. Because if that's all you're looking for is a cessation of your pain, your suffering, basically having your needs met, then it's not a relationship you want, it's a servant at the end of the day. And it's important to recognize that. We always come back to self-honesty. Self-honesty is really the fucking driver here. Like, if you can't look at yourself and think, yeah, okay, that's coming from need, there's not a fucking thing I can do. Honestly, it doesn't matter how much I talk about this shit. It doesn't matter how many books you read. It doesn't matter how much you get into Krishnamurti. If you aren't willing to look at yourself and go, ah, fuck, I just don't want to be alone, then you're never going to progress past that lesson, because you're not willing to look at it and take the hit, the feeling that goes with that, because it's a shitty feeling. It really is, or at least it feels that way at first, because it's sobering. It's the same as somebody coming up to you as you're getting far too involved with the party and going, you know, we got to go home now. Fuck. You know, that's not what I wanted to hear. But if you stick around, there's going to be so much more destruction. So you might as well sober up and learn from the experience. Cherish the experience that you've had, but now learn from it, right? And so this kind of goes back towards sensitivity. And what I'm saying about not being self-absorbed, not thinking about yourself all the time, allowing yourself to have that sensitivity and that one-on-one relationship goes towards groups as well. Somebody was just asking here that they were a driver for Uber for a while, and they did great in one-on-one conversations, which is what I'm saying. But as soon as it was a group, all of a sudden it was much harder. Well, why is that? Well, because in a group, there's even more importance on you being a light touch, especially if you don't know that group. If you're the newcomer to that group, you're not going in there to dominate the conversation, which means it's even more important for you to be able to put yourself aside. It's even more important for you to not have to get the attention of this one person, or have somebody understand you fully, or be heard, or any of those things. You have to put yourself aside even more. So a good way to look at it would be like, imagine a conversation is like being on a trampoline. Okay, so if it's you and I on a giant trampoline, that's not really that difficult to judge or manage, right? I can jump around a little bit as long as I'm mostly respectful to you and I don't get too close to you. I'm not going to knock you off balance, right? And the same is true for you. But if there's 6 people on that fucking trampoline, all of a sudden everybody has to walk a little more carefully. All of a sudden everybody has to be a bit more considerate of everyone around them, because every move that you make is having an impact on the foundation that everybody else is stepping on. And that's why groups are so much more difficult, is because if it's all about you and you're just bouncing up and fucking down, not giving a shit about anybody else, they're going to get uncomfortable. They're going to go, what the fuck? You know, I'm not getting a chance to bounce. I'm not comfortable in my space. I don't feel like anybody's giving me any consideration. And then they're going to have difficulty with you. That said, too, sometimes you don't want to bounce at all, because you see everybody else bouncing. You're like, oh, Jesus, what if I interrupt the flow? You know, what if they don't like me because I'm not bouncing like them? In which case, just slowly work your way in. It's just about paying attention, not having any need, sensitivity. It's just like anything, familiarity. The longer you spend with these people, the more you start to understand their flow, so long as you're not getting in the way. So long as you're not getting in the way, so long as you are feeling the trampoline, feeling the bounces as they happen, and not just superimposing, oh, they're going to bounce any minute now, and reacting in anticipation or anything like that. It's really just getting out of your head.
Yeah, I like that example a lot. And because, you know, whether you're overly, you know, taking over the conversation and there's a lack of sensitivity through trying to, you know, project your own needs through talking way too much and, you know, not giving someone else their turn, or not talking at all, like those are kind of two ends of it. And it's almost like, you know, talking too much, not being considerate of anyone else because you want to get your points across. You want to talk about yourself. You want to talk about the things that you're going through and, you know, get validation from other people, is like jumping up and down a ton on the trampoline with no consideration whatsoever, versus, you know, not being involved at all out of concern for how you'll be perceived. It's kind of like sitting down cross-legged. Like it's going to get in people's way because you're not sensitive to, like, you're not having the influence because you're on the other end. So like, you're not really on your feet, kind of like feeling the flow. It's like you've restricted yourself and you're just like sitting there. And, you know, if you've ever been on a trampoline and someone like goes into a cannonball type thing, it's like they're bouncing all over the place and just running into people left and right. And so either way, it's like letting go of your concern and your need at the same time, because if you lack concern but still have a lot of need, you can be the person going crazy all over the place, because it's like you don't give a shit how they're going to perceive it, but you're still trying to get all of this across out of your own need and validation. But if there's, you know, a lot of concern and no need to be involved, then you can be that person on the other end. And so it's really letting go of the need and the concern allows you to be sensitive to the flow. And both of those are kind of like different ends of the spectrum of the same sort of spectrum, and having that sensitivity. And it really depends on where you're coming from, I think, too, and understanding, because I think some people come from a spot of more need, some people come from a spot of more concern. So it's going to be dependent and dependent on where you're coming from, but we all have components of both, and they kind of go hand in hand as well. Like the need to be seen in a certain way, whether it's by yourself or by other people that you're using as an excuse to be seen by yourself, or, you know, validate yourself in a certain way. So it really is a practice, and it's just about going into it more and more and more. Like the more reps you get on that trampoline, the more the sense of the flow that you get, you know, as everyone's sort of bouncing around, and it becomes a sort of dance. But yeah, so groups are definitely different, and that's, yeah, the trampoline example I think gets that across very well. But yeah, I've been trying to keep up with
Oh yeah,
the
no, there's lots of questions.
comments. Got a
Absolutely.
couple more. All right, cool.
We do. We'll switch direction here quickly because, you know, it's we got about a half hour left. Do y'all believe in an infinite universe? And what do you guys take from the Bible talking about heaven and this place we go after death if we believe in God? So same answer. I don't believe anything. And the reason is because, frankly, the experience I'm having is all encompassing. There's so much to it. So do I believe in an infinite universe? I'm not even sure I end, honestly. And that's all I'm experiencing is me. So if you were to just sit there and just continue exploring your awareness, you would continue to find more and more and more and more and more awareness. And there isn't a single thing in the universe that you'll ever find, regardless of where it is, that at some point your awareness couldn't come up with just out of the random potential of shit that it could make up. And so I think it's more important to recognize whether or not there is an actual universe, or if there is, in fact, just awareness with an infinite reflection of that awareness, in which case, it's not only is the universe infinite, the word universe doesn't even mean anything because you keep thinking about something around you, right? But what if it's not around you? What if the awareness that you're experiencing is the universe? So there is no internal. You are in the universe as much as it is in you, right? So then the entire question of infinite becomes even more ridiculous because now it's a paradox, right? How did it end? How does it start? And it doesn't. It's always just you now. Right. So no, I don't believe in an infinite universe because that would require me to make an assumption and, more importantly, ask a question that's frankly irrelevant to my existence right now. Does it ever end? I don't even know if I end. All I know is that I can continue to see more and more and more of me if I let go of the smaller and smaller idea of me, which goes back to the question about God. If you believe in a small idea of yourself, you are going to believe in a small idea of everything else. And that is where the idea of God comes from. And heaven, the idea of heaven, and if you believe in God, you'll get to heaven. That all sounds just ridiculous when you look at it for what it is.
Yeah, I always find it interesting how much our idea of God is a reflection of our idea of ourselves. Like people can actually maintain the idea that God is like judgmental for certain things that just happen to validate all of their beliefs about themselves and about reality. Like this is the right way to live. This is the wrong way to live. And the right way to live just happens to be the way that they're living. And the wrong way to live just happens to be the way that they're not living, or, you know, resisting themselves from living because they want to get to heaven. And it's all this like contorted fucking half-ass backwards way of existing and seeing things through just limited perceptions and ideas. Like we've gotten so lost in concepts and ideas believed to be the truth that we think that there is actually the possibility that we can think about something like, you know, God or heaven or whatever, and actually come up with a conceptual idea that is adequate, like adequately explains it. Like we've gotten that, I don't know, like we've gotten that afraid, I guess, really. I was going to say like falsely confident in that idea. It's kind of absurd that we've been able to take concepts and ideas so far that we actually believe in them like that. Like those are all God, heaven, your ideas of them are all just conceptual ideas. They're all just things that exist inside of your mind. So it's funny that we even give them the degree of weight that we do. But I get it because, you know, we're afraid. And then in regards to the infiniteness, it's not so much, you know, people like to deliberate and talk about it, and it's all based around assumptions that you're settling upon. Like the only thing that you really truly know is that you're here now, and you start thinking about where that ends. You know, here and now can be conceptual to you, but you know, when you start looking at them for what they are, you know, here being for me in this room right now, like that's just where I get comfortable in saying here on any scale of that. There's no edge to here. It's just where you're willing to take it and how uncomfortable you get before you just choose to settle upon an assumption. Like, no, here. It's like, okay, but what about, you know, extend that a little bit more. What's saying that that isn't here versus there? It's like there is no there. It's all here if you're willing to explore it. And so the conversations are kind of funny because it's kind of like the philosophy is the disease for which it should be the cure. Like you can discuss and deliberate on the concepts, on the conceptual, on the ideas forever and never discuss what's actually real here and now. Like it's all lost in ideas and concepts. And you never come back to, okay, but what do we know? You know that you're here now. Okay. Is that, you know, how much is here? How much is here really? Like, well, I don't know. It's just my life. It's like, whatever. It's like, no, there's so much more that you're avoiding because you're attaching to the conceptual, because, you know, don't feel okay with where you're at. We're always trying to avoid or satisfy a need or do all these things that take us out of the experience that we're having, which is the spot in which we can actually explore what is real and dig into what is real. But because we get uncomfortable with that, we just, you know, go to the deeper discussions. And it's like, there's a lot here. There's a lot to explore as you, and, you know, you keep letting go of the ideas and the concepts, you realize just how much is here and what this experience really could be like here and now. Because there is a shift in it. There is definitely a shift in your experience if you're willing to let go of those assumptions that you continue to make each and every moment of each and every day.
But that's just it, right? Like it's difficult for us because we keep trying to understand the concept of God. We keep trying to understand the concept of universal consciousness. We keep trying to understand, you know, what would it want? Where is it going? What's the plan? All this stuff. And there's always more and more people that are willing to be like, it's this, which just happens to align with what I like. And so we don't recognize that that is not the path to understanding what it is you're trying to understand, which is why I love the question, where do you think God is if not here now? I mean, everybody's looking for the right book. They're looking for the right path. What you're looking for is right fucking here. It's right here. It's just a matter of understanding you can't feel it. You can't sense it. You're not even aware of it. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, that you actually have a veil pulled over your eyes that you have learned to habitually keep there. And if you learn how to move it away, all of a sudden, the thing that you're trying to understand, God or Yahweh, the ineffable, the Tao that can't be told, it doesn't matter how you want to label it. It's right there. It's obvious. It's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of trying to memorize or understand or any of that. It's right there. You can't help but stare at it because it's always right in front of you. It's just that there is an illusion that you are invested in that blocks your view. That's all it is. It's not about finding the right answer. It's about abandoning your need for them so you can actually just shut up and be here and be informed by everything you already are. Right? That's the true definition of prayer or meditation, is to just allow yourself to be, because in that, there is more education waiting to happen. There's an entirely different way of being that exists in allowing yourself to be informed by what you are instead of trying to be something else. So Andrew and I actually got into this in a deeper way over a 2-day workshop called Beyond Belief. You can get that workshop right now on our website at dualisticunity.com. Use the coupon code Yes You May for the entirety of the month of May, and you can save 25% on it. But that workshop is by far my favorite out of all the workshops we've done, because it goes into this one problem with the recognition of unity or God or the universe or your role as everything. It's fucking belief. That's what it is. It's belief. Immediately you're holding on to a description and it's blocking you to the described. You can't see it, right? But if you understand that, then there's a way that you can just start ripping apart those layers so it becomes more and more obvious as you walk along the path to here and now. There is no path. This is why I love Krishnamurti's truth is a pathless land, right? But it comes down to clarity. If you don't have clarity, you're always going to feel lost. Doesn't matter if you're looking right at what you want, you cannot see it. So do check out that workshop because it's fucking great.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones. And really, for anyone enjoying this bit of the conversation, it really does dive into that. But yeah, goes into it pretty good, and kind of circles around what we're talking about now. And it's funny how many times, we have this conversation so much, just like in general, we talk a lot about these things, and yet it's still, every time it hits me, like, feels so fucking new. Like every time I'm like, and even, God, even now, like, I recognize it, but there's like a shift in feeling like you're fucking like really, really in it versus kind of like it's right there. But there's like a balance between it too. Cause if I'm really, really in it, it's like, I can't, like, it's not that I can't by any means, but there's no desire or concern for like pulling back at all. I just want to keep running through it and in it. And I know that's another concept, like being in it. So it's like this, you're always in it, talking about whatever you're talking about is it. But maybe, I guess the shift for me is like, unwillingness to give myself leeway with thoughts about things. Like, we were talking last week for a bit on one of our calls, maybe on a group call, about friends and having friends or getting people to see you in a certain way or whatever. And there's just like a sense of like, what friends, like what other people are you foisting this responsibility onto? Like, what other people are you perceiving right now? And why are you still perceiving them? Like, are you listening? Like, are you paying attention? Are you really paying attention to where you're at? Are you willing to continue to question? Like, have you, like, I don't know. And I only say that because I do that with myself. Like, who are you trying to get to like you if you ever get caught in that? Like, who are you ever trying to get to like you but yourself? Like, it's all you, it's all your projection. And so even that, and I've just been noticing how many things we do suck us into it. Like, we were talking also the need to we were talking last week, the need to figure it out. Like, I want to keep going into this conversation. I want to dig deeper. I want to figure out another thing that's keeping you from doing so. I want to figure it out. I want to get this deeper. I want to. Who Who wants to exactly? And that's it. Like how many things are right there tugging at us, and that desire to get it, to figure it out, using air quotes, is another thing that keeps us in it, like keeps us from recognizing what it is, what you are, like what you truly are. That desire to figure anything out or get anything or accomplish anything or become anything is like, what the fuck are you becoming? What are you attached to? What are you trying to be that you aren't already? Like, what are you trying to become? What idea of yourself are you trying to build? Like, you're just avoiding, you're just continuing to avoid the reality of what you are here and now. And so but it's so many things do that and pull us. And it's like there's always some subtle tug, and it's right there and willing to take you. You're just like, oh, that is a shiny one over there. I like that one. That one makes me feel good. It's like you're buying into believing that the dream is more real than it is. I don't know. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I get it. Absolutely. Because what you're talking about is faith. This is why I always come back to that. It's just letting go. But every time that we start to do that, all of a sudden our life changes. And we go, oh, okay, hold on. What's happening? Got to understand this. And we just slam the brakes on. All of a sudden there's a me that's trying to understand again. And it's because the feeling that we had up until then was intense, and it was starting to get more intense because it's different than the way that we're used to thinking. We're used to thinking, I have a problem. I have to go that way. I need to understand my path. Because I'm a fucking narcissist. At the end of the day, I can't stop thinking about myself because the alternative is surrender. The alternative is just to flow through your life, never ever grasping on anything as being indicative of your value or worth, which means recognizing that you're not separate from everything else, and not recognizing it conceptually, but letting go until you just don't think about it. See, that's the whole point. We're all just trying to get to this idea. It's like, I understand that we're all one. That's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is a cessation of thought until there is only the experience of being one. And that's the reality, right? It's not a conceptual unity. It's the foundation of your existence. It's just you, but it's not you, the idea. That idea is how you run from how much you are. That idea is how you pretend you have control, and you satisfy your petty little needs, and you judge yourself, and you play it like other people don't know the fact that you're judging yourself and all that other fun stuff. We have secrets and all of that. And because if we didn't do that, then all of a sudden we would just be a part of everything else, and we'd be the flow, we'd be reality. But that means that, again, that need to go, but what does that mean? That's just fear. It's just fear and avoidance. I just want to slam the brakes on because otherwise I'm change. Right. But what does that change mean? Where's it going? Is it good change? Is it bad change? And it's like you're just change. Like you're fighting your own reality. You're fighting your own fundamental nature, that you are change here and now, always. And that has nothing to do with whether you're good or bad. It has nothing to do with your value or potential at all. It's the nature of existence. Without you, there's nothing. There must be change. There must be you.
It's funny how quick that concern comes in, like the desire to know what's changing. Like the way you just put that, I was like, damn, it really is that. It's like going through it, like not thinking about yourself so much, not having so many thoughts, like things are just happening, things are playing out. And then you start like, it's like you're flying without thinking about it. And then all of a sudden you're like, holy fuck, wait a second, I'm flying. Wait, do I know how to fly? Hold on. Wait, am I flapping my wings correctly or whatever? And then you're like, oh shit, wait, I'm not really doing it anymore. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to land. Wait, do I have a place to land? And then you get caught on that, and then you're just losing steam, and you know how to, but it's not like a conceptual, like, all right, I flap my wings in this way, and then they come down at this point, and it's not that. It's just you already have the capability. You already have the ability to do all the things. It's just how much is in the way. And this is all right. This then brings me to the singing stuff. And I wanted to ask you, because I've been, sitting in the dream and that sort of recognition and understanding that everyone who's ever had a beautiful voice was me, also me. And so there's been points where I like see that it's like their expression is coming from the same root of what I am. And so there's almost like, I don't know if it's like a tapping into that or a cessation of the idea of what Andrew is and Andrew's capacity and capabilities. And because all it is with me, learning how to sing is there's a lot of shit in the way of expressing what could be there without so much in the way. And so, yes, it's getting the reps in, working on, I've been, looking up YouTube videos and whatnot and just like doing it a bunch, but it's simultaneously like getting those reps along with all of the layers in the way of my idea of what I could or couldn't do. And even the idea of like, oh, I can do this. It's like, just find out, because I can do this. It's like, where's that coming from? It's almost like you're adding extra layers, and like, you don't have to do that either. You're still adding layers and adding weight, because then eventually, you start building yourself up enough, and then you get prideful about it. And we said last week, pride goeth before the fall. And so there's going to be an eventual cost. So being able to kind of maintain that balance of just a lack of a story and a lack of concern of how it's going to come out, like it's interesting to recognize, I guess, the main thing that you are everyone who's ever been a good singer and or good at anything. And so it's like, it's there. It's just waiting for you to be willing to put in the time and attention to uncover it. And there's just so much with the concern, it's almost impossible to find that out, because there's so much fear in the way. There's so much in the way, but I haven't been having that so much. So I've just been like, let's find out. Let's see where this goes. Let's try it for a year and see how I sound in a year. Like, that's kind of it.
Yeah, because there's not so much you in the way. And that really is the largest problem, right? Like, you'll notice that with anything that you tackle, at first you're just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna jump in, and you do something as slapdash as you can, but like, it's done. Like, I did it, and you convince yourself of that. And then as you continue going, you start to slow down, because there's less need to prove that you can do it to yourself. And so you stop thinking about yourself quite as much. And then all of a sudden what you find is that instead of singing songs, you're walking down the street just humming notes, and only because you're having fun practicing how it sounds, you're feeling the note, and so you're putting the time into actually the subtlest of motions. You're putting the time into the little things in between that don't necessarily come up to a song until they're all mixed together. You're just enjoying the act of making sound, right? And you're learning how your body makes sound. You're like, oh, if I pull it from down here, oh wow, look at that. There's a different tone to everything, and it just seems like it rattles more in the back of my throat, and right. And it's just like all of a sudden you start to recognize that you yourself are an instrument, but you get into it. Right? You get into the experience of it. You're not thinking, can I do this? You're not thinking, oh, I've got to measure up to this. I've got to be like that guy. I got to sound like this singer. I've got like, it's none of that. It's none of that, because it doesn't have to be. It never was. Everybody who's ever gotten good at singing, for the most part, did so through enthusiasm, passion, and repetition. Being able to sit there and go through the scales, as much as you and I are like, oh, that's cool, but kind of boring. Like, I just want to sing a song. It's that stuff that leads to that control during the song, right? That ability to hold that note while you're singing comes from holding that note while you're not singing, right? But how much of it is, I want to be a singer, instead of, I'm really enjoying making sound. I'm really enjoying seeing what I can do with this fucking cool tool that's got like several different kinds of sound that it can make. There's different vocal cords, like there's 2 different levels of vocal cords, which is why like monks, when they go, oh, you're just like, holy shit, like that's really deep, right? And it's because they're using a different set. entirely. There's so much that you can do, but it comes down to, again, is it you doing it? And if it is, there's pressure and fear as opposed to just doing.
Yeah, and it's any idea, right? Like the idea of being, I want to be a singer, like that's going to come with an additional weight, an additional pressure, because then, and I think people forget the flip side of it, because if people like to think that telling yourself a positive story is like a great way to, get motivated, and you can do it, but you're just creating expectations for yourself. Like whether even if you take them lightly, if you're like, I can do it, I could be a really good singer, I am a really good singer, you start doing like the affirmations and shit, like you're building this conceptual idea, you're molding this conceptual idea in your head every time you say, I'm a good singer, I'm a good singer, I'm a good singer, or whatever. I'm using singing as an example, obviously, but it's for anything. I'm good at this. It's like conceptual idea, molding, and it's like it's creating walls and barriers and hindering your ability to just step into a situation and be free and be willing to, find out. It's like we attach to the story with the positive narrative, with the, I can do this, positive beliefs, whatever, that isn't necessary. Cause then you start, it's almost like you start doing it more, you start maybe getting a little bit better. And then that expectation keeps rising with that. And you never really arrive because that bar keeps getting moved as you go. And you don't even notice that you're making progress because you have this conceptual idea of what that means and where it's going and what you can get out of it, or what it means and what it means about you, basically. And so that's going to cut that ability to make progress in half at most, maybe not even, because it's as it means something about you. It's like your idea of you, and it adding to that is like sucking away from the ability to be just attentive to the experience that you're having for the sake of doing so and not forgetting anything out of it. And that's always the case with anything that we do, is that willingness to just let go of what it means about you and just be it. Because then you can utilize all of that energy, all of that attention towards a thing that you're doing, and the progress is going to be just not even comparable to what it would be if you were caught in yourself the entire time and what it means about you.
And that's one of the indicators of mastery. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of master you meet, whether it's a master electrician or a master blacksmith or a master carpenter or a master scientist, somebody who's been doing it for a very long time. What you're going to recognize is an exquisite amount of attention. That's what they've learned over years and years and years of experience, not just the mechanicals, but the importance of attention, because that's what we're always learning in the mastery of anything. It's not just about, the fundamentals, which is helping us learn how to do the thing, but that our level of attention really determines the quality of what we're doing. And so it's always mastering attention, which is always mastering surrender, because you can't pay attention if there's a you that you're thinking about that's taking away from your attention. So that all said, we are at the end of our time for this episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. We are going to continue in a tier 2 call on Patreon. You can join us at patreon.com/dualisticunity. If you do have questions about belief and God and monotheism and a bunch of other stuff, do check out that Beyond Belief workshop. We have 4 other workshops as well, all of which are worth watching, very reasonably priced. Check them out. Let us know what you think. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, but this has been fun.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. It's been I don't know. Yeah, things are getting interesting for sure. But I appreciate everyone for all of the comments and for tuning in today. And yeah, we'll talk to some of you on Patreon in 15 minutes.